Today, I want to answer this question: how do you buy a house on a land contract? In today's market, being creative is going to be an absolute game changer for you as a buyer or a seller. What if you can't buy a home through traditional financing? What options are out there? Well, there's a land contract, but how do you buy a home through a land contract? Well, by the end of this video, you're going to have a clear roadmap to purchasing a home through a land contract. You'll understand all the benefits, but also the potential pitfalls. I'm going to help you feel confident that buying a home through a land contract is something that you can do, even if the banks have said no. Did you realize there's a way to buy the home without qualifying through traditional mortgages? Are you curious about how to negotiate directly with sellers, potentially saving money and overcoming credit hurdles? Well, stay tuned as I answer these questions by first explaining what a land contract is. I'll next explain why would a buyer and seller want to jump into a land contract, and finally diving into the pros and cons for a buyer in utilizing and buying a home through a land contract. If you're ready, let's go. A land contract is a legal agreement with a seller finance purchase that is negotiated between buyer and seller. All the terms are negotiated between buyer and seller. Everything from the purchase price to the interest rate, down to the contingencies that might affect any of those key points. And in a land contract, the buyer makes periodic payments to the buyer, but the buyer holds title of the property, the deed, until the land contract is paid in full. The buyer might have equitable title, but the seller holds the deed. So when is a land contract typically used? One of the main reasons why a land contract is used is because a buyer, rather than going through a traditional mortgage that might take time and it might cost a lot of money, has an alternative to go and have home ownership with little money out of their pocket. Because many times that down payment can be negotiated to zero and closing costs are very minimal. As compared to a traditional mortgage, those are going to be really expensive. So as a buyer, it is a great tool to get into a home when traditional mortgage just isn't an option. And even though the seller isn't getting the money up front that he would on a traditional sale of the home, he is making money, and that money is paying his mortgage if he has one, or it's a way for seller financing to bring money in every single month. And the fact that he's willing to seller finance through a land contract, that really opens up the pool of buyers, because if you just say, hey, my home's for sale, and people can't get a mortgage, that limits how many people could buy your home. But if you open it up through seller financing through a land contract, that really widens the pool of buyers out there. So here are some quick pros and cons for both the buyer and the seller. From the buyer side, the pro is, once again, you don't have to use traditional mortgage. If you've been in a situation where you've been through a short sale, a foreclosure, your credit isn't that good, you haven't built up your credit, or you do not have enough money for a down payment or closing costs, a land contract is an absolute great tool to do this. But there are some negatives associated with it. You're not building up a ton of equity in your home. You're not building your credit because the seller is not reporting your on-time payments to any credit agencies. And probably the biggest negative to a buyer in a land contract is if you default on that contract, the seller, which this is an advantage for the seller has the right to evict you from the property and keep every single payment you've ever made and not have to pay any of that back, and can put you on the streets and not have to foreclose on the property. There's no recourse, unless obviously you get some attorneys involved, but typically a land contract really benefits the seller. So as I mentioned, that is a pro for the seller. Another pro is also widening that buyer pool through a seller finance option. It also takes a lot less time, so you can have somebody in your home right away. You put up on market, you get somebody in there, you can have somebody seriously the next week, maybe even the next day, making payments on your property. And another advantage for the seller is they can actually do a land contract even if they have an existing mortgage. It's called a wraparound mortgage, which means they receive the money from the buyer, the payment, and they wrap it around and pay their mortgage company, and they pocket the difference that's left over. The negative for the seller is the fact that they're dealing with somebody who maybe isn't as credit worthy as other people out there. They take a big risk, and because of that, they will typically charge a higher interest rate to make it worth their while to take that risk. So now that we know the mindset of the buyer and seller, what a land contract is, let's talk about how you buy a home with a land contract. Number one is the buyer. You've got to go in with a mindset when you're talking to realtors or anybody. You could even go online. You could even post on Facebook, look at, I'm looking to buy a home. I'm willing to enter into a land contract. And if you let them know that, there are some people who are great candidates for that. So obviously finding the right seller is key. And then negotiating the purchase price of the home, the interest rate, the down payment, if any, closing costs, the monthly payment, and the cadence of those monthly payments, they're all negotiated directly between you and the seller. And you might even be able to find people that just live in a home, and maybe it's a for sale by owner. That's probably one of the best ways to find a home that would be willing to do a land contract, because they're listing it by themselves, and especially if it's in a market that's maybe a down market, like we're experiencing right now where there's not a lot of homes moving, you as a buyer have a lot of advantage to utilize a land contract. You negotiate all those terms, you do your due diligence on the home, you sign the land contract and move into the home. The steps are pretty simple, and then you're going to start making payments and eventually pay off that loan. Now, land contract is a great tool, but if you are a buyer, I would highly recommend talking to a real estate attorney to have them look over the land contract, because land contracts can differ from state to state, even county to county. So having that set of eyes on it is going to save you some undue concern. Now, with the land contract, there's some amazing real estate strategies as an investor that you can do. But one strategy where I flipped land contracts and slow flips on their head is something called cash flow flipping. It is probably one of the coolest strategies out there where you can make money in any market, even if a market is stagnant or going down, and anybody can do it in anywhere in the United States. And it's something that requires little to no money out of your pocket. It is an absolute game changer to build wealth in real estate. And if you want to watch my full video, the link is here, and I explain to you exactly how I came up with this strategy, exactly how to do this strategy. And if you watch this video, you'll be able to go out and do this strategy right now. It is that awesome. Thanks for stopping by. Have an amazing day.